Good morning, everyone. I'm Tanya O'Rourke. By now, most schools across the tri-state are back in session, creating a greater need for two local organizations. We have folks from Lighthouse Youth Services and the Free Serve Food Bank with us on our show today. First, though, we want to start with a growing need for mental health services for children in our community. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 1 in 5 children and adolescents experience a mental health problem during the school year. Lighthouse Youth and Family Services is working to meet that need. So joining me are Jason Pratt, the agency's Chief Operating Officer, and Jody Harding, Vice President of Clinical Services at Lighthouse. So what do you experience at the start of the school year? What do you see?
Yeah, so it's funny because you have different seasons where different professions really get busy. You think about tax time or back to school time is one of our tax times. The need really sort of explodes at this time of year because if you think about it, kids have been out of school during the summer. There's a lower level of monitoring that takes place there. There's less activities that take place, less stress, more time off. And all that anxiety, all that sort of unchecked need that took place over the summer really sort of rises up and is identified very quickly as we get into the new school year. So I mean, it's truly one of the busiest times of the year.
So Jody, what do we look for as parents?
I think as parents, you just have to be aware of what is normal for your kids. Any major changes that you might see with behavior or mood, those are the kinds of warning signs that we would ask for parents to look for.
And what do you see? What types of mental illnesses do you see?
It runs the gamut. I mean, we can deal with some pretty severe issues, family violence, community violence, abuse and neglect, but then there's also kids that just maybe are changing to a new school and are having trouble adjusting, or divorce in the family, or maybe a family loss. So it really runs the gamut to from very severe to kind of acute issues that we can deal with in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, I think a key point to that is that trauma can really look different for each individual child. So while there are those big issues that are obvious, there are also issues like toxic stress and these issues that build up over time. I mean, we live in a community where 1 in 11 children will have contact with Child Protective Services at some point.
That's a stunning number.
1 in 8 are living currently with a parent who is struggling with a substance abuse issue. So this builds up and they take this to school and it may show itself as a quiet child, a withdrawn child. It's not always the obvious symptoms. So that buildup of toxic stress over time shows itself in school performance, shows itself in the deviation from the norm in terms of what they've shown in terms of behavior. So watching for those changes and reacting quickly is very important.
You do offer school-based services. What does that look like? What does it involve?
So it involves us really giving access to kids and families that don't traditionally have access to services because of barriers like transportation and work schedules. So it really allows us to be able to provide services to kids that wouldn't traditionally get it. We ask that parents be involved in the process, but it's a referral process from teachers, principals, things like that. And then, it's kind of us determining what level of need there is, if any, for a client that's been referred.
Lighthouse really tries to do their best to integrate with the services that are available within the schools. You would think, and there's this false confidence that, well, there is a counselor in the school,
right,
so they should be able to notice this.
Right?
These counselors are so relieved when agencies like Lighthouse show up because they're so overwhelmed, and they have all these additional responsibilities. They're doing scheduling, they're doing transitions, they're operating within the school system. So we really try to fill in whatever gaps that they may have and meet those needs that oftentimes have been unchecked for years.
So does it matter where my kids go to school? Are you in every school?
No, well, we have official partnerships with certain schools, but we also serve clients that have been referred from various sources in their schools, as long as the schools are okay with it. So school can be a great location to meet kids where they are, but they don't have to be referred by the school.
Okay, so let's say, for example, I call you as a parent and say, my 13-year-old is struggling. I can't get him there, so then Lighthouse Youth Services will come to his school.
Absolutely.
And deal with him there. So this is not like an actual program where you're in there all the time. You're there on a need basis.
Both.
Both.
Yeah. So we try to maintain a daily presence in these schools. So we have offices in a lot of these schools. We are seen as part of the counseling team within the school. But Lighthouse is large enough that we can offer additional resources when the acuity is higher or when there's a larger need. Like if there's an incident or something that happens in the school, if there's a suicide, for example, we can offer trauma-based teams, trauma-informed care, set up safe rooms, and we have a much larger presence in the aftermath of something like that, but we still try to maintain daily contact with these schools.
You bring up suicide, and it's something that I take a little bit of an interest in because it's happened in my kids' classes, especially when it gets to high school, and especially boys, it seems. So what if we have a kid that we're not sure? As it turns out, one of my kids' friends committed suicide right at the end of the school year, and these kids knew that this child was suffering. Should they have stepped forward? Should they have come to us? What happens? As
a parent and a professional, I always encourage open and honest communication with our kids. If they are used to having conversations with you about difficult topics, they're much more likely to bring those things to you when they arise in school, in the community, wherever it might be. So I'm a big proponent of talking to kids about difficult things when they're ready.
Do not wait. Would be my piece of advice. You have instincts as a parent, and they are good. Trust those instincts. Now, it doesn't mean that you're tossing their room or invading their social media accounts or becoming a detective, but engage in those conversations sooner rather than later at first suspicion, and don't be afraid to rally resources. The thought is, well, if they have to have an evaluation or assessment, there's something really wrong. Absolutely not true. It could be the thing that determines there's not something wrong, but there's supportive services that we can set up around that child to make sure it doesn't get worse.
Yeah, the stigma is a big thing. There really is, and I don't know if that will ever go away, but that's why it's so important to have those common conversations with your kids, because then it's just something else that they can bring to you, just like anything else.
Is it almost sort of like, look, I'm here, should you need to talk to me? Or
yes,
if you ever think you're going to hurt yourself, please come to me first.
Yes. Or if you ever have concerns about a friend of yours, or if you see something in a friend that's concerning to you, let me know. I mean, there's ways to handle it.
I mean, let's accept the fact that since 2011, more children, adolescents and down, are dying from suicide than homicides. So the stigma is an illusion. This is in every community. This is down the street. This is behind closed doors.
Rich, poor, all socioeconomics.
You cannot spend your way out of this issue. So please, whatever you can do to knock down those doors and open those lines of communication sooner rather than later. Engage with their friends as well. Be a safe place for that and a non-judgmental place that they can share that.
Is suicide almost always a result of a mental illness?
Not necessarily. I mean, there could be some kind of acute issue that really has triggered something in a child that really has nothing to do with an ongoing mental health issue. It could be anything. You don't know.
It's something as simple as a sense of hopelessness, an inability to see options. You have to think from a brain development side, they can't consider all the angles like an adult would, right? And so that's why it tends to escalate faster in adolescence from first thought to actual action. So giving them ways and outlets to express that type of stuff, that's where things like experiential group therapy, art therapy, physical activities, ways to express music, things like that, that they can really get these feelings out and express that. That is an excellent way to head this off before it becomes a big problem.
All right, we have so much more to talk about. Our conversation about mental health with Lighthouse Youth Services will continue right after the break. Stay with us.